When you get to the end of the Bible, to the book of Revelation, you run into some of the most intense and symbolic visions ever written down. Today, we're going to focus on a big one, this idea of a great cosmic harvest at the end of days. It's a powerful prophecy of judgment found in Revelation chapter 14.
So you've got this angel crying out a command to a divine figure sitting on a cloud. It's urgent, it's powerful, but what does that even mean? For the harvest of the earth to be ripe, what exactly is getting reaped here? Well, as we're about to see, the answer is a lot more complex than you might think.
Because it turns out this passage isn't just describing one single event. Nope, it's actually a vision of two totally separate and very, very different harvests. The first one, that's a gathering of the righteous for salvation. But the second one? Well, that's a grim reaping of the wicked for wrath.
Okay, so let's jump right into that first harvest. And the best way to do that is to look at the key figure who shows up. I mean, the description we get of this reaper is incredibly specific and just loaded with symbolic meaning.
So John, the guy who wrote Revelation, he sees this figure on a white cloud. He's described as looking like unto the Son of Man. He's got a golden crown on, and he's holding a sharp sickle. Every single one of these details is a major clue, pointing us toward who this is and what he's about to do.
And this is where it gets really interesting. That phrase, Son of Man, coming on the clouds, that's not new. Not at all. As you can see right here, it's a direct callback to a famous prophecy from the book of Daniel, chapter 7, which describes this divine figure arriving with the clouds of heaven to take over and execute judgment.
And who else claimed this title? Well, Jesus himself. When he was on trial before the high priest, he basically quoted that exact imagery from Daniel, identifying himself as that very same figure. So the harvester in Revelation, it's being presented as Christ.
So let's be super clear here. In this biblical context, when you read coming in the clouds, it has nothing to do with the weather. It's a powerful symbol. It means a divine being has shown up to lay down a judgment. And in this first harvest, that judgment is all about gathering the righteous.
All right, now we have to shift gears to the second harvest because, whoa, the tone just completely changes. The imagery gets way darker, way more violent, and the whole vibe becomes much more severe. This is the other side of that judgment coin.
So here's how it goes down. A different angel, this one also holding a sickle, comes out of the temple. Then another angel, one who has power over fire, comes from the altar and gives the order. And this time it's not a grain harvest. He says to gather the clusters of the vine of the earth and throw them into a winepress.
And just like the first harvest was ripe, these grapes are too. But here, that word means something really sinister. According to the source we're looking at, this ripeness means fully ripened in iniquity, basically total moral corruption. The idea is that the nation had reached a point of no return, where judgment was seen as the only just outcome.
And all of this leads us to the climax of the vision. And honestly, it's one of the most terrifying images in the entire book of Revelation, the great winepress of the wrath of God.
The verse itself is just stark. The angel grabs the vine, which symbolizes the wicked, and just hurls it into this massive winepress. It's an image of incredibly powerful, violent judgment.
Now, obviously, we're not talking about a literal piece of farm equipment here. This is a devastating metaphor. The act of crushing grapes for wine becomes a symbol for the absolute destruction of the wicked. And that red juice flowing out, the vision makes it very clear. That's their blood.
And you know what? This isn't the first time this image pops up in the Bible. Not by a long shot. The prophet Isaiah uses the exact same imagery, treading a winepress, alone, in a fury, with blood staining his clothes, to describe God's judgment on his enemies.
The vision then gives us a scale for this destruction that is just staggering. It says the blood from the winepress flows out for 1,600 furlongs, which is about 200 miles, and it's as deep as a horse's bridle. The interpretation here is that this distance is symbolic of the entire length of the land of Israel.
So, you have this incredibly intense symbolic vision. What does it all mean? Is it about some far-off future apocalypse? Well, the interpretation we're looking at today argues that it was fulfilled by a very specific, very real historical event, connecting this vision directly to the swords of the Roman army.
And the argument really hinges on something Jesus himself said. In the Gospel of Matthew, he drops this stunning prophecy, saying that the judgment for all the righteous blood shed throughout history would fall upon this generation, meaning the people who were alive right then and there. And this timeline really helps connect the dots. First, around 30 AD, you have Christ's prophecy. Then, a few decades later, John gets this vision of the two harvests. And then what happens in 70 AD? A massive cataclysmic historical event. The Roman army completely sacks Jerusalem and destroys the temple, leading to just unimaginable bloodshed.
And this isn't just theory. We have historical accounts from the time that are just chilling. The Jewish historian Josephus, who is an eyewitness to the whole thing, wrote this visceral description of Jerusalem's fall. His words about the city running with so much blood it literally put out fires. I mean, that sounds terrifyingly similar to the winepress imagery, doesn't it? In this view, the prophecy was fulfilled.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap of what we've unpacked. We've seen how Revelation 14 gives us these two symbolic harvests. One for the righteous, led by the Son of Man, and a second, terrifying one for the wicked, symbolized by grapes in a winepress. Key symbols like the clouds and that winepress are all about judgment and wrath, and the interpretation we've explored today connects all of this directly to the historical destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
And all of that leaves us with a big question to chew on. When we start to view these apocalyptic visions not just as predictions of a far distant future, but as powerful, symbolic commentaries on events that were happening back then, how does that change the way we read these texts? It really grounds them in history, but what do we gain, or maybe even lose, when we look at them through that lens?